In this lesson, we will talk about color labeling. This is a great way to visually organize all of your files inside your sequence, such as all of your footage or all of your audio, and separate them from other things such as effects you created, titles, and so on. To get started, let's go into Premiere Pro Preferences, and let's go down to Label Colors. Now, I like to create very vibrant colors. If we go into here, let's create one that's pure red. We'll set that to OK. We'll call this Best Take. We'll call this one Good Take. We'll call this one Usable. We'll change the Good Take one to a nice blue color. We'll change Usable to something like that, which means it's not great, but it's usable. Then I normally create one that's pure black that's called Not Usable. Then we can create one for, let's say, pure white, which will be titles. We can create one that's pure green that are effects. And then you have two more if you want to create some other ones. But that's typically what I do. You don't have to do exactly what I did, but it just really helps with organization, and I'll show you why. So let's click OK. You can see that it's changed all our clips to white. Now, if we go into our all footage, remember these are global settings. The labels are global settings, so any sequence will be the exact same. So what you can actually do is when you're picking selects, if you've set up your labels, when you go through, let's say this is the clip you like, you can right click here, go to label, and click best take or good take or whichever one you want to do. And then it is very noticeable how different it is than the other clips visually. Just very quickly you can tell that that is a clip that you want to grab. Let's say you're going through and this is your second select. You right click, go to best take, and you're going through and this clip is good. It's not the best, but it's definitely something you want to use. So you can say good, and you're going through, and this clip, you don't want to throw it out, but it's not something you think that is your best take or even a good take, but it might come in handy. Set it to usable. So once you've gone through all of your selects, you can actually click one, hold shift, and then just go through all of them and just check all of them. Copy, go over to your other timeline, which is your main edit, and paste them, and then all your selects already labeled with what you consider the best to worst is. That's another great way to edit. In our edit, we've already selected these as our best takes, so we can label them red. They're all red. Now, we know this is a title, so we will go label title. So now it's white. This is a color matte, so that's an effect. And after a while, when you start having dozens and dozens of different things, it's very easy to find out what something is. So you could create another one that's called interviews and make it, purple color, for example. And then when you look at this on layer 2, you'd have all of your purple clips. And then underneath would be all your best B-roll clips, which are red. And then you'd have your effects clips above, which are your, green clips. And then your white intro clips are above that. And then your title clips, which are white, are above that. In this lesson, we will discuss nesting and what it is. Okay, so nesting is basically a sequence inside a sequence or a timeline inside a timeline. They all are the same thing depending on the program you use. For example, After Effects calls it pre-composing, and that basically means that a composition that you create or a timeline exists within another composition or timeline. So in Premiere Pro, they're called timelines and sequences. You have a sequence inside your timeline window. So when you have a sequence inside another sequence, it's known as nesting. So for an example, if we wanted all three of these clips to appear within a sequence, in other words, nest them so that they show up in one layer, we select them all, right click, go to nest, call it what we want. We can say intro sequence, click OK, and then you'll see here that says we've created a new sequence called intro sequence. We'll put it inside our sequences folder, and then you can see what happened. It created a nest in our timeline, and it looks the same visually. However, if you open this up, it opens our new sequence that has our 3 inside it. Now the benefit to this is you can still adjust these however you like, but now you can also play around with the scale and everything by only using one layer because they're all inside it. So for example, we can go up here and type in fast, which is fast blur. We can drag it down, and then we can blur the whole image, and everything gets affected. So that's very powerful. Okay, so at the beginning, it's set to 43. We can click on the stopwatch, make a keyframe there, go a little further to right. Okay, it stops there. We can create another keyframe, or we can simply just start dragging and it'll auto-create back to 0. So from the beginning it's blurred and it becomes in focus. Okay, so let's watch that. Okay, so that's just one example of nesting. You could do this with several different layers. You can do this with an unlimited amount of layers and turn them all into one. If you wanted inside here, you could still nest again, and you can do that as many times as you'd like in order to make editing more efficient. In other words, if you were to try to do this blur effect, you'd have to do it 3 times, whereas doing it this way, you just nest it and then you just do it once. In an earlier lesson, we built this intro title. Now, lower third titles are created pretty much the exact same. However, you may have a few extra layers of text. So let's create a lower third title, for example. Okay, so let's get started. Another way to create a title quickly, instead of going to title, new title, and default still, is by simply pressing Command T. From here, you can name your first layer in your lower thirds. This one can be called Will. And then we will go to our type tool. We will call it Will. We will make sure that it's selected. We will change it to the font we want to use. We will roughly put it in the spot. Okay. Then it was created right here. Then we will create another one, Command T. We will call this OVC Masters. And we will do the same thing. And because my timeline cursor is over this one, we can see the preview of that. Let's call this OVC Masters. Okay, so let's make sure that's selected. Once again, change it to the font we want to use. We will bring it underneath. We will lower the size a little bit. Okay. Then we will drag that one down here. We will go back into the Will one by double clicking. And then if we wanted, we could add a last name to make it fit a little better. Okay, then we'll go back into the OVC one by double clicking. Now because Will is above it, it's not going to show it, so in this case we'd have to do that, and then it would show up. So OVC Masters. Okay, now I don't think that looks too great, so instead what we'll do is we'll play around with it a bit, we'll lower it, we'll play around with the kerning. Maybe change the color, make it like a blue, and okay, so that's good. We'll go into the Will one. We'll change this color too. Okay, And then from there we will create a new color matte. We'll create it like an off-white. Call it off-white. Then we'll place that inside our titles. We'll put this one inside titles, this one inside titles. And then we will take our off-white one. We'll drop it below. So now it's covering the entire screen. On this layer, we will crop it so that it makes just a nice little border. In order to do that, we go into our effects panel, type in crop. We'll drag that down. And then we will bring that down to roughly, let's try there. We'll go to the right side. Then we'll try the bottom. And maybe we just need a little bit on the outsides. Okay. Then what we can do is on this layer, we can go into opacity. We'll get rid of the keyframe so we don't have any keyframes. Then on opacity, we will drop it down just a bit so you can see a little bit of what's going on behind. We can try maybe 74, 75%. So now that is a basic lower thirds title. If we wanted to add a little bit of production value to this, we can select all of them, right click, go to nest, call it lower thirds title, click OK. Then we have this on one layer, and because it's a title, we'll label both of these white. And right now it's not doing anything, it's just sitting there. So to add some production value, we can animate it in and animate it back out. So this is on V4, so we will turn that layer on. Then we will press the up arrow to make sure we're at the very beginning. We will go into motion of this layer. We will create a keyframe under position, and 960 is the default, so we need to remember that number. So we will move it all the way off screen. You can see this starting to go off screen. We will keep going until it is all the way off. Then we will go with the keyboard on the right arrow, roughly, let's say 16 to 18 or 20 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16, 17, 18 we'll try. We'll type back in here 960. Okay, and then we'll go to the very end. So in order to do that, we press the down arrow, and we'll have to go back one frame in order to show the last frame, because if we actually press the end, it isn't the final frame. It's actually the start of the next frame. So let's go to the end and then back one. So always at the end, if you want to see the last frame of this video, if you go to the end, it shows nothing because it's the next frame. So you need to press the left arrow to show the last frame. If we go to the beginning, you see the beginning of this because it's the very start of the frame. If we zoom all the way in, it's the very beginning. In order to show the last frame of this, we need to go back one. Okay, so in order to see the last frame of this, we need to press down and then back one frame. There it is. Now, because we've already created keyframes, we have 2 at the start. We don't need to worry about this anymore. All we have to do is continue animating. So again, we'll remember 960, and we will take this and drag it off screen again. And then we will go back once again, about 18 frames. By using the left arrow this time. And now we will type in 960 again to bring it back. That automatically creates a keyframe. So we have one keyframe where the animation is off screen, doesn't exist even though it's the first frame because we've pushed it all the way off. Then we have this frame. If it wasn't highlighted, that means we wouldn't be on this frame. Okay, so at this second keyframe, we're back at the original position. So it animates in, and then throughout all this time, it stays there. And then from this keyframe, which is the same keyframe as this, they're just both set to 960. Then this one goes back to where it was before, all the way out. So let's watch what that looks like. Okay, so essentially to establish somebody speaking, you'd show the clip, have the person here speaking, and then you'd have this title to establish who they are. And this is known as a name title or a name key or a lower thirds title. In this lesson, I will teach you how to create a freeze frame, which in Premiere Pro is called a frame hold. In this example, we will use our intro sequence. We will double click it to open up our nested sequence. And on our bottom layer, we can see that if we scrub through it, we have moving footage. Now, sometimes that's what we want, but if we don't want that, if instead we just wanted a slightly blurry freeze frame to use as our background image, then to do that, we find the frame that we'd like to make a freeze frame of, which I think that's nice. Then we right click and go to Add Frame Hold. Then from here, it'll be playing, and then all of a sudden it'll just stop. So in this case, we don't want the beginning part, and then we can move this to the very beginning. And because it's a frame hold, no matter how long we create this, it acts just like a still image, basically exactly like this. We could create that as long as we want, and both will show up for as long as we make them. Let's undo. We'll stretch this to that. So now for the entire beginning, we have a still frame of the image. We can then go in and add what's called a fast blur and slightly blur the image to make this a little more prominent.